Good morning. Today's opening words are entitled "The Great Teachers in Life" by Jason Cook, a commentary by Jason Cook. We seekers are on a quest to discover truth and meaning. Sometimes we think we found it, wrapped up, glimmering with newness, straight off the intellectual assembly line. All the answers right here for us and others, if they'd only listen. But truth has a way of coming in disguise, sometimes wearing rags and sometimes wearing finery, but so often cloaked from our immediate sight, and sometimes that which we have rejected, that which we have let go of or decided was only for others, but not us, can be our teacher. Let our time of worship be an acknowledgement of the never-ending journey toward truth and meaning, and our appreciation of those we learn from along the way.
Good morning. Good morning to you here with us in our main hall and to you at home who may be tuning in via Zoom or Facebook. I will be this morning's worship associate. My name is Terry Donaldson and my pronouns are she and her. Today is a Sunday program committee service. Our interim minister, Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner, leads 3 Sundays a month, and she will be in the pulpit next Sunday. Know whoever you are and whomever you love, and wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Sorry. Oh, you're not hearing me. Thank you. No. Sorry, I'm being told not to touch them. How about that? Much better. Good morning again. We have a few announcements this morning. The stewardship team has great news. The 2023-24 pledge drive has reached its goal of $300,000. In fact, we have pledges amounting to $303,876. That makes us very attractive to ministerial candidates. You made it happen, and we want to thank everyone who has made their pledge. There are still about 15 people whom we haven't heard from yet, and if you are one of them, please stop by the welcome table today in the social hall after the service. Thank you. Thank you. If you are new and would like to learn more about our fellowship and Unitarian Universalism, plan to join our interim minister, Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner, and our UUFH Connections team next Saturday, March 11th from 9:30 a.m. to 12 noon in the social hall. Light refreshments will be served. You are invited to an informational presentation about Friendship Force International next Sunday, March 12th at 12 p.m. You'll learn about this nonprofit, non-political, non-religious organization, which was endorsed by President Jimmy Carter in 1977. As citizen ambassadors, we all can make a difference. Experiencing different views and discovering common ground is their mission to promote peace. Mark your calendars. Our annual blood drive is back. Please join us as you are able to donate blood on March 26th from 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. More information to come. And finally, if you were inspired last week by Barry D. Light's plans to build an African-American museum in Huntington and would like to sign and send a letter of support to our town clerk, Andrew Raya, please stop in at our table in the social hall after the service. You must be a resident of the town of Huntington to sign. For more details on these and other activities that you can participate in, please see our weekly newsletter, The Flash, or visit our website's news and announcements at uufh.org. And now please join me in saying our mission statement. The words are on the screen. In religious community, we nurture our individual spirits through caring for one another and helping to heal the world. I'd like to invite Nina up to light our chalice this morning. Our chalice lighting is entitled Open to Unexpected Answers by Julianne Lepp. We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, and welcoming of multiple truths. At this time, I'd like to invite our children of all ages to the first two reserved rows in front of the screen to watch the video, The Girl Who Never Made Mistakes. We're going to sit in the first two rows, you guys. Very good. Thank you, Mari.
Girl Who Never Made Mistakes by Mark Pett and Gary Rubenstein. Illustrated by Mark Pett. For Beatrice Bottomwell, Friday began like any other day. She matched her socks, and of course, she put her shoes on their proper feet. She remembered to feed her hamster, Humbert, his favorite food, broccoli. And when she made a sandwich for her brother, Carl's lunch, she used exactly the same amount of peanut butter as jelly. When she stepped outside to greet her fans, she didn't forget to say good morning and thank you. They asked if she made her bed. She had. They asked if she forgot to do her math homework. Nope. What about tonight's talent show, they asked. I'm ready, said Beatrice with a smile. After all, her juggling act had won 3 years in a row. Most people in town didn't even know Beatrice's name. They just called her the girl who never makes mistakes, because for as long as anyone could remember, she never did. Unlike Beatrice, Carl made lots of mistakes. He ate his crayons and drew with his green beans. He danced with his hands and played the piano with his feet. Carl loved to make mistakes. At school, Beatrice was on a cooking team with her 2 best friends, Millie and Sarah. To make their giant rhubarb muffins, they needed 4 eggs. Beatrice went to the refrigerator and carefully chose the biggest, eggiest eggs she could find. But on the way back, her legs slipped out from under her. The eggs were flying. Beatrice was about to make her first mistake. But she didn't. That was close, thought Beatrice. Sorry, Beatrice, I dropped a piece of rhubarb. Und infinite, illy. For the rest of the school day, Beatrice could not stop thinking about her almost mistake. On her way home from school, Beatrice watched Millie and Sarah ice skating in the park. Come join us, said Millie. It's fun, said Sarah. Beatrice watched them slip and slide on the frozen pond. Millie and Sarah laughed as they wobbled on the ice. No thanks, said Beatrice. At supper, Beatrice barely touched her food. Is everything all right, kiddo? Asked her father. I'm worried I'll mess up tonight, said Beatrice, and everyone will be watching. Worry? You don't make mistakes, he said with a smile. Beatrice tried to smile too. After supper, Beatrice got ready for the talent show. First, she woke Humbert from his nap. Next, she got the salt shaker from the kitchen table. Finally, she filled a balloon with water. The school auditorium was packed. Beatrice felt her stomach jumping around inside her. Beatrice waited for her juggling music to begin. That's her! That's the girl who never makes mistakes, said a woman. Oh, we'll know she'll be perfect, said a man. When the music started, she tossed Humbert into the air. Next, she added the salt shaker, and finally the water balloon. Beatrice didn't miss a beat. The crowd clapped with delight, but Beatrice noticed something odd about the salt shaker. The specks falling out of it were not white. Achoo! Humbert was so surprised by his sneeze that he grabbed the water balloon with his claws. Kablooey! Humbert, pieces of water balloon, and the pepper rained down on top of Beatrice. For the first time, and as long as anyone could remember, Beatrice made a mistake, and it was a big one. The music stopped. Beatrice didn't know what to do. Cry? Run off stage? The crowd sat stunned. They couldn't believe that the girl who never makes mistakes made a mistake. Beatrice looked up at Humbert. He looked back at her. His hamster fur was soaked and speckled with bits of balloon. Beatrice let out a giggle. The giggle grew into a chuckle, and the chuckle became a laugh. The people in the crowd looked at each other and then back at Beatrice. They began to giggle, then chuckle, then finally roar with laughter. Beatrice and the audience laughed until they couldn't remember why they were laughing. That night, Beatrice slept better than she ever had. In the morning, no fans greeted Beatrice. When she got dressed, Beatrice, for no reason at all, put a polka dot sock on one foot and a plaid sock on the other. Beatrice and Carl made sandwiches. This time, they put the peanut butter and jelly on the outside. They called it an inside-out PB&J. Lunch was messy and delicious. Later, Beatrice found Millie and Sarah skating in the park. They fell a lot and laughed. Now, people no longer call her the girl who never makes mistakes. They just call her Beatrice. Beatrice Bottomwell has never, not once, made a mistake. The end. Girl Who Never Made Mistakes.
How many here have ever made a mistake? I'm so glad to see that I'm in good company. Do you think there really are people who never make mistakes? No, I can see a clear answer on that. No. Can you think of a time when you made a mistake? For me, it was just yesterday. Very simple. Anybody remember a time they made a mistake? How did you feel making that mistake? I can tell you mine. Probably a bit of shame, some regret, a little uncomfortable. Anybody else have feelings when they make a mistake? Millie?
That you chose that.
Upset that you chose that. Jake? How did you feel when you made a mistake?
Sad.
Sad. Anybody else? After watching Beatrice live so tight, trying not to make mistakes, and finally making one, how did she feel after that?
Happy.
Happy. Can you say more about that? What made her happy?
As when she made her first mistake, everyone laughed, and even she did, and she had fun ever since.
So after realizing she could make a mistake, she felt relief, happier. Wow. Go ahead, sweetie. How did Beatrice feel after knowing it was okay to make a mistake? Keep thinking. Anybody? Come on, you big ladies.
She probably felt good.
Say it again.
She probably felt good.
She probably felt good. So when you think about in the future making a mistake, do you think you might think about it differently after reading about Beatrice? Yes, Millie says. Yes, anybody else? Yeah, we're all human. We can make mistakes, and there's a great relief to know that it's okay to be human and make mistakes. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Let's sing our children and youth to their RE classes. Each month, our Sunday collections are split between our charity of the month and our congregation. This month, we will make a donation to Doctors Without Borders, Turkey and Syria response. We have all seen the unbelievable disasters in Turkey and Syria caused by the earthquake a month ago. While we have looked on with horror at the humanitarian crisis that has ensued, emergency teams of medical people have headed there to treat as many people as possible and assess the damage in these areas. Over 50,000 people have died, and many more than that have been injured and left homeless. We can help those who are helping with our donations this morning. Please be as generous as you are able.
The journalist Catherine Schultz, the author of Being Wrong, wonders why human beings make so many errors and offers us a number of lessons from our errors. She suggests the hypothesis that our perceptions are filtered through our beliefs about reality, producing distortions of reality or belief-dependent reality. Error is pessimistic if viewed as unacceptable, and optimistic if it leads to self-examination. She thinks that if you regard error as deplorable, as in the view of theologian Thomas Aquinas, belief-dependent reality is pessimistic. But if you regard error as explicable and acceptable, as in the view of psychologist Liam James, she thinks it is actually optimistic. Enlightenment scientists tried to extrapolate scientific method to cultural applications, such as political, social, and even aesthetic disciplines. Psychoanalysis revealed psychologic insight into slips of the tongue and dreams, revealing our unconscious misperceptions of reality. When our perceptions are fragmented, we see illusions or miss seeing altogether. But the most elementary reason we get things wrong, according to Schultz, is that our senses fail us, producing illusions. When perception is fragmentary, we fill in the blanks, increasing the possibility of error. We are also prone to inattentional blindness, focusing in one area and disregarding others. The bonds of community may unconsciously narrow our views, and if those views are unbalanced, may cause us to see and act in error. Groupthink may cause misperception. For example, zealotry is not only ideological, but it's also methodological, producing action on the conviction of certainty, even to the point of murdering in the name of faith. The author thinks that zealotry begins at home, and the righteous anger we may feel toward people whom we regard as irrational and wrong may stem from biases reinforced by our communities. Schultz says that the feeling of certainty is toxic to imagination and empathy, and may force an interpretation of truth without entertaining other possibilities. Doubt seems to be a skill which has to be learned. Belief is like an instinct. Instinctive certainty is toxic to open-minded doubt. A default cognitive setting providing a comforting illusion of stability and knowledge. We feel safe, informed, intelligent, and powerful when we are certain. We are averse to uncertainty. On the other hand, certainty is pragmatically useful. Emotional certainty may override doubts and project strength, even when erroneous. Our memories are often unreliable in recalling past beliefs. Having been wrong might bother us, but still being wrong can be overwhelming. It is terrifying to lose belief without a substitute. Unresolved wrongness about important things can lead to a sense of terror and disorientation if we move from belief to disbelief without a replacement. Acknowledging that we are wrong depends on accepting error, both inwardly and outwardly, as well as depending on the time of life, emotional and intellectual skills, and flexibility. Too much distress due to error produces defensive isolation. Resistance to error may increase if it produces too many uncertainties and emotional distress, and may lead to stubborn defensiveness, causing us to strand ourselves out on a limb. Wrongness, grieving, and loving are all serious emotional experiences. Schultz says being wrong, like grieving or falling in love, is fundamentally an emotional experience. As with love and loss, so too with error. In her book, the author describes a number of life situations in which error plays a role. She begins with a description of the mid-19th century Millerite episode, in which the preacher, William Miller, predicted the end of the world and the second coming of Christ. Hundreds of thousands of people were disappointed when the predicted day came and went without any disturbance. Schultz indicates that the Millerites were subsequently inundated with explanations, all minimizing the predictive error and rationalizing why the second coming was postponed, including the assumption by the nucleus of today's Seventh-day Adventists that eventually conditions on earth would be optimal for the second coming. We downsize more than we size up our errors. The author concludes that we are not so much honestly trying to size up our errors as frantically trying to downsize them. The author also describes errors in eyewitness identification, showing that eyewitnesses often get their facts wrong and misidentified people, and usually had great difficulty accepting their mistake, a response to evoked emotional feelings which are too much to bear. Schultz turns to the issue about our being wrong so often about love. He points out that even when unconditionally loved as children, we shouldn't expect uninformed love as adults. As young children, we learn to get emotional reassurance and closeness from others, which conditions our expectations. Later on, however, making sense of another person's mind is based on scanty information, since most of what matters is submerged, invisible, and difficult to understand. Isolation produces speculative despair, which we may escape through love's ecstatic union. She refers to the novel Robinson Crusoe, in which a marooned sailor on an island he named Despair symbolizes the isolation we feel when separated from other individuals, except for our speculations, which leave us vulnerable to error. She states love is an attempt to change our fundamental separation into ecstatic union, escaping from despair. She refers to Plato's speculations that love restores us to a lost wholeness, but she finds this inaccurate because love falls apart so frequently. Schultz thinks that we are swayed by the conventions and prejudices of our communities in our attitudes towards love, using scanty evidence to make assessments. She thinks we treat our lovers as we treat our theories, rejecting the one that isn't working with a new one to replace it. The feeling of love may transcend suffering, protecting us from despair. However, the emotional significance of the romantic notion of lost love is very consequential because of love's protective effect against loneliness and despair, and its ability to transcend the gap between us and the world. The feeling of transcendental love can save us from always feeling suffering, even though we are often wrong about love. The author describes interviews with a divorce attorney who paints a vivid picture of the collapse of sentimental love. Divorcing people usually feel righteously wronged, denying their own flaws. Divorcing people feel deeply wronged and incredibly righteous, and they are shocked to accept personal fallibility. Flaws are denied, as is individual complicity. She also interviews an expert marriage counselor who describes a pattern of merger of consciousness early in love, but subsequent power struggle for dominance as the individuals differentiate and diverge. The troubled couple violates the individual's reality and needs to lessen pugnacious reaction and to increase loving understanding of error and disagreement. The tacit contract to recognize the other person's reality is violated, and to remedy this, the couple ought to move from reactivity to curiosity and listening to answers, living with disagreement and error, accompanied by esteem and love. Unlike the romantic notion that disagreements and error are not acceptable. The author describes a marked reversal of a previous viewpoint, so great that she calls it transformation or conversion. The example that she gives involves an official of the North Carolina Ku Klux Klan, who in 1970 was asked to join a workshop on integration of schools in Durham, North Carolina, along with a Black woman representative of an impoverished and disenfranchised Black community. Initially, the two foes faced off with racist accusations, but eventually they recognized that school segregation was a lost cause. When the Klan member received an anonymous death threat accusing him of being a traitor to the white race, he reacted by calling the Black woman, indicating that he wanted the desegregation plan to work. The Klan official and the Black woman representative were thrown together and in the process talked about their early personal lives and children, as well as the mutual experience of being humiliated by poverty. The two community leaders were emotionally overwhelmed, recognizing each other as human beings with similar problems and mutual affection and admiration, and also recognizing that white people were the obstacle and that segregation accomplished nothing. Subsequently, the Klan official quit his position with the Klan and pursued organizing efforts in support of the Black community, a transformative change in his identity made possible by an overlapping shared identity with someone who had previously repulsed him. Sometimes error disrupts our identity and redefines it. Schultz remarks that sometimes error reveals that we are not what we think we are, causing us to become someone we never imagined we would be. She indicates further that all errors have the potential to disrupt our sense of self and repudiate and redefine our identity. She gives the example of buyer's remorse after an acquisition and the realization that the acquisition was not needed or even foreign to our needs. When we feel right, we feel grounded, confident, and sane. We want to be right about ourselves for the same reason we want to be right about the world, enabling us to feel grounded, confident, safe, and sane. We yearn for perfect self-knowledge and consistency, even though they are unobtainable. We can accept some identity change, but not the essential elements of our character, although error can change our idea of who we are. Radical transformation likely occurs by chance rather than predetermination. Such radical transformation sometimes makes people think they have assumed their so-called true identities. The author thinks this is implausible, and we are really just acknowledging that we can change by chance in the construction of ourselves. A true self, on the other hand, would imply that our lives are predetermined, and the departure from the self is an aberrancy. When we are small children, we make errors all the time, thinking that dolls are like humans or that gender is interchangeable, dependent on hairstyle and clothing. Being wrong may be playful learning, especially in childhood and adult play. Being wrong in a child is child's play, part of learning and theorizing. As we get older, we make fewer mistakes because we spend less time exploring the world. Although sometimes as adults, we turn to exploration, for example, in traveling, in order to be a kid again and play and feel adventure. Sometimes we visit unknown places within us through psychotherapy to explore our unconscious minds, uncovering errors. Practices like prayer and meditation also help us to explore and accept our fallibility. Acknowledging our fallibility makes us compassionate. When we experience errors, we are alerted of our fallibility, transforming us into compassionate people instead of taking errors to mean that we are ignorant, idiotic, or evil. We will now return to our exploration of being wrong after the next interval.
This is the time in our service for you to share your joys and concerns by silently lighting a candle. You may have your joy or concern shared aloud by writing it on a slip of paper, adding your name, and giving it to the pastoral care associate who is standing by the candles. Please come to the front of the hall by the center aisle and return to your seat by the sides. We will miss you, Margot. For Jane Wisen, challenged by brain cancer. For Michelle Ocasio, who will have open heart surgery tomorrow. And healing for Zoe, Doug, and Maureen. Our reflection today is entitled Wiser Today by Deb Cannon. Following this, we will have a moment of silence. I have made mistakes, and some I have even learned from. I am wiser today than I was yesterday, and hopefully tomorrow I will be even better informed. May I speak from my learning and not from my habit. If I speak from my habit, may I interrupt my words to start again. If I don't know, may I be silent and listen.
The author describes previous statistics showing large numbers of errors in medical treatment, aviation, and business manufacturing, and the steps subsequently taken to prevent errors in the future. These include relying on hard data, dealing firmly with deviation from norms, acceptance of the likelihood of error, and prevention management, including protocols and communication, instead of defensiveness and denial. Fallibility applies individually, but also communally. Accepting fallibility surely applies to each of us as individuals and to all of us as communities, cultures, and nations. Young children comprehend simply. As we grow, we comprehend provisionally with greater tendency to ambiguity in females and certitude in males. In early childhood development, children comprehend ideas by splitting, so-called, between yes and no, black and white, until around age 5 when we learn maybe, the first of many doubt-filled words introducing the conditional tense and the subjunctive mode. As we grow and develop further, gender differences in provisional word usage tend to produce a greater ambiguity in females and greater certitude in males. A provisional mindset entertains inquiry. The use of provisional words allows us to question our beliefs and address complex and riskier thoughts, moving towards inquiry and away from decree. We can avoid premature conclusions by avoiding generalizations based on a narrow focus in support of our beliefs. Sometimes people limit their attention to ideas that match their own or listen only in order to contradict, argue, and accuse. In order to try to prevent mistakes, we can foster listening, the freedom to speak our minds, open and transparent environments, and the obligation to point out potential error. The author thinks that these guidelines are also a prescription for democracy. Democracy disrupted the infallible, quote unquote, rights of monarchs. Before the advent of democracy, political structure rested on the religious concept of divine right of kings, who were considered infallible until religion was separated from politics. Some Enlightenment thinkers subsequently considered infallible thinking as the aggregate will of the people. Jefferson saw truth emerging from argument and debate. Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, saw truth emerging from free argument and debate, and so he argued that political leadership came from an openly fallible body politic. American religious freedom inspired political freedom. The American model of religious freedom inspired a model of political freedom with both freedoms in enduring era in the interest of social peace. Early American statesmen grasped the truth that truth and error are often unrecognizable, and both must be permitted to flourish. Benjamin Franklin stated, quote, "We are forced to govern in collaboration with people whose political beliefs differ from our own," close quote. The author notes that this is the origin of federalism, where sharing of power protects against consolidated power drowning out other viewpoints. Democracy tolerates changing laws, political parties, and political opposition, all changes due to perceived error. She also points out that tolerance of error is implicit in the ability to change the law, the presence of political parties, and freedom of political opposition, all necessary to maintain democracy. And the founders saw to it that the United States would not attempt to be a one-party utopian fantasy. Schultz refers to the historian Richard Hofstadter, who wrote that before the advent of democracy, political opposition was considered intrinsically subversive and illegitimate. Unconscionable errors in democracy are not always preventable, but can be corrected. However, the author asks, what happens when the errors of a free and open society are unconscionable, as in withholding women's votes, enslavement of human beings, spying on political opposition, and torturing enemies of the state? She acknowledges that these errors are a breakdown of democracy, and the expression of these and other beliefs could entrench perversions of democracy. She states that such perversions are sometimes preventable, but not always, and they must be dealt with as flaws which can be modified. Wrongness is entwined in comedy, and wrongness is entwined in art, in learning, individuality, and survival. The author indicates that wrongness and comedy are entwined at their roots, and adds that wrongness is also entwined in art, learning, individuality, and even survival. Being wrong can be funny, especially when other people are wrong. There's something error-like in comedy. We laugh when we sneer at others or at ourselves, or see incongruity in events, or when we realize that we are fundamentally alone. Some suggest that we laugh when we can sneer at others, but a more generous view is that we laugh out of self-recognition. A third possibility is that we laugh at the mismatch between expectation and reality, the incongruity theory. Getting things wrong produces the pleasure of comedy. We bumble between the world as we think it is and the world as it really is, laughing at mistakes or laughing because of mistakes. Because of the gap between reality and perception, we laugh as we become aware of being fundamentally alone. Sometimes we estimate reality through art, which is inherently unrealistic since art substitutes representation for reality. Art as imitation and art as error are pessimistic. Art as inaccurate reality is optimistic because such imagination exposes error which had been disguised. She refers to Socrates, who viewed art as imitation, and Plato, who viewed art as error, interfering with the creation of the ideal. However, the author sees both the view of art as imitation or art as error as pessimistic models of wrongness. She prefers to interpret the inaccurate representation of reality in art optimistically because of their power and beauty. She considers error to be a mechanism of imagination, which changed the purpose of art from disguising error to exposing it. The modern increased interest in error was accompanied by an increased suspicion of rightness and the emergence of surrealism and Dada, largely in reaction to the carnage of World War I. Schultz says that art is an intentional journey to the gap between representation and reality. The surrealist and Dada movements' deliberate attempts to not be right were an innovation in how we think of art, but it was still an intentional journey to the gap between representation and reality. Artistic errors produce uncertainty and mystery in the land of wrongness. In art, disruption, reinvention, and pleasure are errors without fear or shame, producing uncertainty and mystery. The author says we enjoy ourselves in the land of wrongness. When the artist and the onlooker temporarily suspend disbelief, they're kept guessing, lost and confused in uncharted territory as they contemplate erroneous distortion. Schultz says that this is the kid-like happiness of disappearing into another world, which temporarily frees us from our isolation. In good art and in contemplating error, we lose ourselves and find ourselves. She maintains that in both the best works of art and in contemplating error, we both lose and find ourselves. She sees this process as analogous to science, except that science seeks the truth and art is individually idiosyncratic. The author states that we cannot be objective in the dictionary sense of having reality independent of the mind. The human mind is better than passive reality because it creates humor, imagination, intelligence, and individuality. No machine feels emotion or wrongness. Our brains introduce a distorting sense of self, conditioning our perceptions so that our beliefs no longer inhere only externally, but inhere both externally and internally. Schultz indicates that the human mind is more valuable than a passive reflection of reality because our beliefs have the benefits of humor, imagination, intelligence, and individuality, even though they might be wrong. She points out that no other animal has a degree of imagination that a human possesses. No machine can make errors contingent on belief, since no machine feels emotion or wrongness. The human capacity for self-creation and error produces individuality and leads to the genetic errors that are the basis of evolution. She turns to depressive realism, which may be literally correct, but it interferes with survival and happiness. Beliefs need to be more functional than accurate, she says. The author makes the case that being right may sometimes interfere with survival and happiness. She refers to depressive realism, which produces a harshly accurate worldview, which may cause depressed feelings. She states that the goal of psychotherapy is to make our beliefs more functional rather than more accurate. Human beings may require illusion about our deepest assumptions in order to maintain homeostasis. She refers to the story of Don Quixote, who misperceives events and people as favorable and happy until his ultimate confrontation with reality produces melancholy and death. Such beneficial deception allows us to overlook our limited control over our lives. Wrongness is a form of optimism, providing endless faith in ourselves, triumphing over despair and closer to hope. Catherine Schultz regards wrongness as a form of optimism when we believe we will succeed despite evidence to the contrary, an endless faith in our own potential, without which we would not undertake very much. We err because we believe, above all, in ourselves. That is why error, even though it sometimes feels like despair, is actually much closer in spirit to hope.
Hard not to smile watching that. We'll extinguish the chalice with these words by Beth Weinicke. May we leave this place seeking an uncharted and freely chosen wholeness, knowing we have companions along the way. Thank you, Isabella. And it is hard not to feel listening to that. Go in peace. To those of you watching from home or at a later time on YouTube channel, enjoy your day. To those of you who are here in person, please join us in our social hall for coffee and conversation, or head to our art gallery and lose yourself and find yourself in our RE art reception. Our children and youth have been learning about abstract expressionism with artist Bill Hawkins. Please take a moment to enjoy their work and talk to the artists. Have a wonderful day.